Hey songwriters, welcome back to the studio, and today I got to sit down with April Keez, who's a songwriting instructor here on YouTube, and we talked about how to start song ideas and even how to get past some of those roadblocks when you get hung up halfway through the process. She had some really cool tips and tricks for giving you direction and vision for your song. So without further ado, let's jump into the interview. All right, well, hey April, it is good to have you on. Thanks for being on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about how to start writing songs and just kind of some things, some tips really for songwriters who either are beginners or they want to kind of grow in the craft of songwriting. And so the first thing I want to ask you about is give us some tips on how do you even start a song idea? Like, what do you do to kind of get the wheels turning and come up with your initial idea?
Sure. So one of the things that I really like to do for like a very, very beginner or for someone who maybe tends to write like half a song and then it's just like, I have no idea where to go. Something I really like to do is outlining. So if you kind of think about the idea of just coming up with everything ahead of time and then being able to do the actual writing after the fact, I just think that's a really great way to get started. So what I tend to do is I have an actual outline, and I guess we're going to link that in the description, right?
Yes, we'll link that
Lovely.
Yes.
But I have an actual outline on my website that I tend to use with students and with people on my channel who follow me. But the idea is basically that you think of a main idea. So just a concept that you feel like writing about. And usually that's like a sentence that's something along the lines of like, I love you, or I'm really sad, or just something really basic and that seems like a good thing to write about. And from there, what I'll do is I'll actually plot out the full song, basically just using like a sentence or a few words to describe what I want to happen in all of those different sections. So that's kind of how I go about doing that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's almost like you're giving yourself a pathway to go down instead of having 1 zillion options.
Right.
To a creator, a lot of times is overwhelming when people are like, I have 1 in a million options. And it's actually reminding me of kind of the sync licensing idea, which is basically they give you this ticket and they're like, hey, we want a song about this. That's about this length. That has this feel.
Sure.
But you're kind of creating that for yourself, which is really cool because it gives you direction for creativity. I think that's pretty cool. That's creative. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it definitely makes the whole process a little bit easier because I feel like when I was first getting started with songwriting, it was such a thing where I would have this brilliant set of ideas in my brain and they would start flowing out of me and it would all be so easy. And then there would be a point where it would just totally cut out and stop. And I just would have no idea where to go from there. So it's just something that I think is really helpful. And I think it's also great to start with ideas that maybe aren't so heavy. Like if you start off by writing a song about a panda, it's going to be a lot less scary to finish than if you start writing a song about like your latest heartbreak.
Yes.
So I think that all of those things are kind of fun because then if you start talking about something that's a little easier to talk about, then it's going to pave the way. You're going to know the process a little more and you can explore those kind of further ideas.
That's really good. Yeah, that's fun. It makes me think of, we do sometimes an exercise around here of seeing what you ate for breakfast. So just come up with a melody line of whatever you ate for breakfast. And it's so funny how people get excited about it. We just kind of put out a chord progression and then people sing to it and it kind of gets their juices flowing, their orange juices flowing, I guess.
Yeah, right.
And
exactly.
It's just a fun exercise. So say for someone who's starting to build out this song, they've got their main ideas and they're wanting to expand, but they're kind of hitting some roadblocks. I know what you're talking about is really helpful, but is there anything else that kind of helps you get over the hump of some roadblocks?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think really for me, it's thinking of different options. So something else that I really like to do is a bubble map. I don't know if you've ever done a bubble map, but the idea is basically you start with a big circle in the middle of a piece of paper and you write out what your main idea is. So like what you've already started talking about. And then you just branch it out. So for instance, if you were doing breakfast, you could do breakfast liquids over in one category, like a little line with a bubble. Or you could do, let's see, foods that I don't like in the morning, or maybe you could do like spicy foods, or you could do, different things along those lines. And then each one of those things bubbles out further. So
That's
if
awesome.
I'm doing morning foods, it could go caffeinated versus not caffeinated, or drinks rather. So I think that's kind of a fun way to do it, is just to have a visual representation. And in general, for me, I think I'm just a very visual thinker. So my brain just comes up with pictures all the time. So when I'm writing, I tend to try to get very specific images in my head. So if I'm writing about, I don't know, a breakup, for instance, something terrible like that, I would try to close my eyes and imagine where it's happening. And I'd imagine who the characters are and what is physically happening in the scene, because then you can start getting visceral with it. Like you can start saying, we're at a coffee shop and we can hear the murmurs from other tables and that acoustic singer-songwriter in the corner. And, you've got all of those kinds of things that you can incorporate. And it just gives you a little more freedom to kind of keep going with it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I feel like that gives some vision, especially like to even how to write lyrics, because you kind of got a little bit of direction. And I feel like that would help you from going in the route of like, oh, I don't know really what I'm saying or what I'm just kind of making a song, and you kind of fumble around. This actually gives you like a destination to go. And I think it would inform your musical decisions, like you're saying.
Absolutely.
You could go, hey, this chord or this vibe fits what I'm aiming for, or this doesn't. So, throw that out. But then lyrically as well, like, it's like, hey, I know what I'm trying to say at the end of the day, and let me craft something around that rather than, just kind of do whatever.
Just kind of going for it.
That's cool. So it's kind of like you're narrowing down your options actually to get more creative. If I'm hearing that correctly.
Right. And that's such a weird thing about creativity, is that when you give someone a whole lot of options, you just think it's that idea of like option fatigue, right? Like you see so many options in front of you and you're just like, oh, that's too many things. I don't really know where to go from there. But if you kind of narrow down the scope, it becomes a lot easier, because you actually can start to envision all of the little details, which I think is really, really cool. And I think specificity is the best thing that you can do in songwriting, even though it would kind of seem to be the opposite, right? You want to get this general scope so that more people relate to it. But if you go in a really, really specific direction with things, more people will actually find truth in that, even if they've never experienced that situation, because they can, empathize, they can live with it,
It's very, very true. That's good. All right. So we'll kind of change gears and think of, okay, we've got that initial idea down. We've kind of built out some larger structure, and now we're kind of trying to mesh the music and lyric thing together. And it's such, it's this mystery or skill, I should say, of taking music and words and putting them into one. So what tips you have, or kind of, what can you share with people as far as marrying those two together in a solid way, rather than like I just didn't put it together.
Exactly. Well, something that I like to talk about a lot on my channel, and I'm sure people are so sick of hearing this from me, but it's the idea of prosody. And prosody is really just the marriage of form and content. So for instance, if you're writing a song about being anxious, you're probably going to have a very quick pace. Like it's going to be a lot of really quick rhymes. It's going to be a higher BPM. It's going to feel a little more anxious. Or if you're writing a song that's about being lackadaisical and, you're feeling kind of apathetic, then it's going to have that kind of flowiness about it. It might be a ukulele, so kind of having these ideas that are a little more related to what you're actually saying. So I think that's a really important thing to kind of be thinking about. And when we talk about prosody, the thing that I think comes to my mind the most is the idea that when you break with that prosody, really interesting things can happen. So a kind of negative example of that would be something like Every Breath You Take or Born in the USA, these songs that are really huge and really popular, but get mistaken all the time, right? Because the prosody doesn't match. So Born in the USA, which is like a protest song, gets played at like political rallies, this really like bizarre kind of, just kind of contrast that wasn't necessarily intended, but because the music is so upbeat, people mistake what it's actually about, that sort of idea. Sure. So, or same thing with Every Breath You Take, which is like the creepy stalker anthem, but again, sounds really happy and like a love song. So, I think that's just a really interesting thing to play around with as well. That idea of, does the music match with the lyrics? And if you're trying to get the music to match with the lyrics, you're going to have kind of a different process, because if you want things to match, then it's going to kind of go more in the direction of, let's think about which scale we're using and why we're using that scale, for instance. I actually just did a video on my channel like a couple days ago, where basically I went through an entire song and just wrote the whole thing on camera. And one of the things that I talked about a little bit was the idea that I'm going to use mixolydian because there is this one note that is flat and the character in the song is feeling like she doesn't belong. So that kind of idea, like there should be that one note that doesn't necessarily work with the rest of the scale. Or if you're talking about going away from expectation, you might want to do an unexpected rhyme, or you might want to have a pedal point underneath so that you can progressively go away from that pedal point. Those kinds of ideas. So you can kind of use music theory to your advantage there. But again, you don't necessarily have to do that.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it sounds like, in a nutshell, even for all the things we've been talking about, it's like having that initial vision or direction. It's like you're letting that inform so many decisions of, okay, what is my music going to be like? What's my meter going to be like? What notes will I use? Maybe what notes will I not use? There's so many things that it helps kind of hone in.
Sure.
Instead of just like, I'm just all over the place. So we're creating, you're saying a song where it's like, I'm talking about this, but it feels like this. Like what I'm saying and what it feels are actually opposite to one another. So that's really, really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
And so where can people connect with you? And give me just like a short snippet of what can they find from you on YouTube, on your website. So
cool. Yeah. So my kind of slogan on my channel is that we are simplifying songwriting secrets. So all of those S's in that lovely little alliteration. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube. My channel is all about songwriting. So sometimes I am sharing my original music. Sometimes I'm doing tutorials. And sometimes, like I mentioned before, I am just writing a song on camera and seeing what happens, which is just a ton of fun. So yeah, that's what I do on my YouTube channel. I also am on Instagram and Twitter. I have a very small Twitter account, but it's pretty fun over there. And I have a Facebook page as well. And I actually have a single that's coming out in a little over a month, and I'm very excited. So you'll be able to find that on Spotify very soon. So yeah.
Very, very cool. Well, we'll link as much of that as we can in the description below. And thank you again, April. I appreciate you coming and just sharing what you've learned and how people can kind of get started and really get some direction for their songwriting.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with April, and be sure to go check out her channel if you want to learn more from her about the craft of songwriting. And until next time, go make some music. Outro.
Let me formulate my thoughts real quick.
Okay.